Okay, so what do man-eating lions, shrinking African glaciers, and, get this, an Australian swamp monster all have in common? I know it sounds like a completely bizarre setup to a joke, but stick with me because prepare to be amazed. Today, we're going to explore how all of these wildly different, disconnected elements actually tie back to a single extraordinary 1937 Bengali adventure novel.
Welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely pumped to break down this amazing source material with you today. We're looking at a beloved classic called Chander Pahar, which translates to Mountain of the Moon. On its surface, yeah, it's a thrilling tale of exploration, but as we unpack the research, we're going to see how this classic story actually holds a brilliant mirror to both hard historical facts and very modern ecological crises.
Okay, let's dive straight into this. Our roadmap today will take us through the legend of Moon Mountain, the real Tsavo man-eaters, the real Ruwenzori Mountains, an Australian cryptid in Africa, colonialism and eco-consciousness, and finally, a lasting cultural legacy.
Part 1. The Legend of Moon Mountain, a 1937 Bengali adventure tale. So the story centers around our protagonist, a 20-year-old named Shankar. It's 1909 and he's stuck in this incredibly mundane jute mill job in Bengal. But the guy has this insatiable thirst for geography and exploration, right? So he just packs up and takes a job as a railway clerk way out in Uganda. Out in the African wilderness, he ends up rescuing a Portuguese explorer named Diego Alvarez. Alvarez tells him all about this legendary yellow diamond mine in the Richtersveld, and just like that, Shankar quits his job to go on this epic hero's journey. Along the way, he encounters roaring volcanoes, deadly black mambas, and a mythical beast called the Bunyip.
But here is where it gets absolutely fascinating. The author, Bandyopadhyay, he never actually traveled to Africa. Not once. Instead, he rigorously pulled from real journalistic sources, explorers' journals, and hard geographical data to build his fictional world. The railway line attacks? Those are based on real historical events. The Mountains of the Moon? A totally real mountain range. He perfectly blended these real-world counterparts right into the fabric of his narrative. Moving on to Part 2. The Real Tsavo Man-Eaters, the 1898 Kenya-Uganda Railway Terror.
Back in 1898, during the actual construction of the Kenya-Uganda Railway, two maneless male lions legitimately terrorized the railway workers. A guy named Lieutenant Colonel Patterson eventually hunted them down. But what's really interesting here is the stark contrast between colonial myth-making and actual modern scientific data. Patterson famously claimed the lions killed 135 men. However, modern isotopic signature analysis of the lions' remains found they actually consumed roughly 35 humans in total. One ate about 10.5, the other 24.2. Even if we factor in unconsumed victims, the actual death toll was likely closer to 72. It just goes to show how history was dramatically embellished at the time.
And the science gets impressively specific. In 2024, researchers did a DNA analysis on compacted hair found literally inside the cavities of the lion's teeth. This proved that humans were actually just a supplement to their natural diet of zebras, giraffes, oryx, and wildebeest. So why did they turn to humans at all? Well, researchers found a severe infection at the root of one lion's canine tooth, which would have severely crippled its ability to hunt large, tough prey. They were likely hunting humans out of pure, sheer desperation.
Which brings us to Part 3, the real Ruwenzori Mountains, the fabled Mountains of the Moon.
In the book, Shankar is desperately searching for the Mountains of the Moon, and in reality this is the Ruwenzori Mountains, sitting right on the border of Uganda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The sheer scale of this range is breathtaking. Mount Stanley alone peaks at an astounding 5,109 meters. It is the highest non-volcanic mountain range in all of Africa, and it supports this completely unique high-altitude ecosystem full of giant lobelias and heather.
But this pristine geography brings us to a very modern, very real tragedy at the source of the River Nile. We can actually trace the devastating speed of glacial recession caused by global climate change right here. Just look at the timeline. Back in 1906, explorers recorded 43 glaciers covering 7.5 square kilometers. By 2005, that had shrunk to roughly 1.5 square kilometers. And shockingly, a 2025 3D drone mapping project revealed that the Stanley Plateau Glacier lost nearly 30% of its surface area in just 4 years. The untouched wilderness Bandyopadhyay wrote about is literally melting away before our eyes.
All right, Part 4, an Australian cryptid in Africa, the bizarre crossover.
Okay,
Transitioning from melting African glaciers to an Australian swamp monster is probably making you think, wait, what? I totally get it. Let's define what we are actually talking about here. According to Australian Aboriginal mythology, the Bunyip is a large mythical creature, often translated today as a devil or evil spirit that lurks in swamps, billabongs, and riverbeds. Throughout the 1800s, European settlers in Australia frequently and mistakenly attributed unfamiliar animal calls to this terrifying cryptid. But in a massive kind of hilarious geographical leap, Bandyopadhyay drops the Bunyip right smack into the middle of the African wilderness. In Chander Pahar, the Bunyip is bizarrely reimagined as a three-toed ape-like hominid that guards the yellow diamond mine. It's a completely absurd yet highly creative crossover. Within the fictional narrative, this terrifying creature is actually responsible for the gruesome deaths of Shankar's mentor Diego Alvarez and the explorer Jim Carter. Which leads us to Part 5, Colonialism and Eco-Consciousness, a modern critique in a 1937 novel. When academic researchers dive deep into this text, they find some incredibly modern eco-critical themes. There is a quote from a 2021 study of the novel that hits the nail on the head. It states, "The hamartia of mankind is the anthropocentric attitude and his insensitivity towards nature. Humans' desire for wealth and sophisticated life has led to the depletion of natural resource." It's basically saying the true monster in the story isn't the bunyip or the lions, it's humanity's growing insensitivity to the natural world. And this brilliantly illustrates the core conflict embedded throughout the entire novel. The text neutrally reports this sharp contrast between two very different worldviews. On one side, you have the colonial perspective, which views the land strictly as a commodity. They're laying railways, hunting lions for sheer convenience, and literally tearing up the earth for diamonds. On the flip side, the novel highlights the indigenous perspective, showing tribes like the Maasai living in direct harmony with a harsh environment, adapting to it rather than trying to conquer or exploit it.
So the big takeaway here is how this 1937 adventure story is secretly packed with highly specific ecological warnings. Think about it. The railway construction destroys the lion's habitat, which is what directly forces the human-animal conflict in the first place. When Shankar builds his station, he's usurping territory from native species like the black mamba. The ultimate quest for diamonds represents mining, which we know causes severe habitat fragmentation and displacement. Throughout the whole book, Shankar is constantly torn between just sitting back and appreciating the raw, aesthetic beauty of nature, and that colonial infection of wanting to exploit it for diamond wealth.
Finally, Part 6, A Lasting Cultural Legacy, From Page to Screen.
Shankar's grand adventure clearly still resonates massively with audiences today. In fact, in 2013, the book was adapted into an absolute blockbuster film, literally becoming one of the most expensive Bengali movies ever made. They went all out, filming on location in South Africa, using Kruger National Park and the Kalahari Desert to capture that majestic wilderness on screen. It was so incredibly successful that it spawned a 2017 sequel, and the original story was even reimagined as a gorgeous English-language graphic novel by Penguin India in 2014. The thrill of exploration is timeless, for sure.
But all of this leaves us with something really important to chew on as we wrap up. If a novel written way back in 1937 was already warning us about the dangers of shrinking habitats, human-animal conflict, and relentless resource exploitation, are we still making those exact same ecological mistakes today? As those glaciers in the Rwenzori Mountains melt away, it's a question we desperately need to answer. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.